up on 21st Century. Hello and welcome to 21st Century. I'm Daljit Dhaliwal. The agony of losing a loved one is unbearable, no matter the circumstances. But imagine waiting decades to find out how a member of your family died. That's been the plight of people on both sides of the divided island nation of Cyprus. But soon, those harrowing mysteries may be solved. It's a Mediterranean country whose rich history and stark beauty belies a past steeped in tragedy. Years of bitter ethnic violence decades ago have left an island and a people divided. Their language, their religion, and their memories keeping them apart. This is the story of two families, two conflicts, and two young men lost on an island torn apart by ethnic differences. Cyprus. From 1963 to 1964, a civil war raged between the Greek and Turkish Cypriot communities there. Neighbour turned on neighbour, community on community. Thousands from both sides were forced to flee or risk being disappeared just for their identity. Turkish Cypriot Mustafa Akay was one of them. His son, Mesmut, was just a baby when his father disappeared.
What my mother went through is beyond explanation. She waited for such a long time with the hope that he would return.
On the 29th of April 1964, Mustafa left his home for a shopping trip to the Cyprus capital Nicosia. He never came home.
We searched for him endlessly, but were never able to find him. I was left alone with 5 kids. I lost everything.
His wife, Ayşe Sultan, whom he married when they were just 15 and 16, waited anxiously for news.
At that time, we hoped that he was held prisoner, but we lost hope as the years passed by.
There was hearsay that the missing and prisoners of war had been found and were still alive. So like everybody, we built up our expectations that he could reappear too.
They still had no news when 10 years later, in 1974, violence erupted again. Following a Greek Cypriot coup, the Turkish army intervened in Cyprus. Battle raged between the Greek Cypriot National Guard and the Turkish forces, with atrocities on both sides. As a result of the fighting, the island was divided, but not before some 2,000 people had been declared missing. In the neutral buffer zone, which still divides the island, time remains frozen, as does the pain for many families of the victims today. Families like this one, whose son, Greek Cypriot Kyriakos Kalika, disappeared. They last saw him in 1974 when he was just 19 years old.
Until recently, we thought he was alive. We had the hope that he was alive somewhere.
Kyriakos was a young conscript in the Greek Cypriot army. He had just a short time left to serve when he came home for 3 days' leave. His younger brother, Christos, was just 12 years old at the time.
And I remember running up to him because I really loved him. He was the oldest one, and I remember him picking me up and just throwing me up on the air, you know. That's a nice memory I had.
They were a close-knit family of 6 children.
I remember him telling my mum, "Mum, it's only 2 more weeks now. Just wash my clothes for the last time and I'll be back home."
But like Mustafa, he didn't come back home. His leave over, he headed north to return to the army base. That was the last time his family saw him. He was sent to the front to fight against the Turkish army, and on the 22nd of July, he disappeared. Uncertainty surrounding the fates of those missing has fueled animosity between the Greek and Turkish communities ever since, and has remained a painful mystery. That is, until recently. Now, in one of the first intercommunal projects of its kind, both sides have come together in an attempt to shed light on tragedies left buried so long ago. Under the auspices of the United Nations, anyone with information is encouraged to come forward to identify suspected burial sites. The painstaking work of exhuming and identifying the bodies has begun. Megan Bassendale is a forensic advisor working with the Committee on Missing Persons.
We are reassociating everything based on anthropological data as well as DNA, making sure that everything is with the correct individual before they return to the families.
Through their meticulous efforts, the years of torment have finally ended for some of the families. Following a tip-off from a Turkish Cypriot informant, Kyriakos' remains, seen here, were found in a mass grave in northern Cyprus with 27 other Greek Cypriot soldiers. There's a bullet hole at the back of his skull.
I felt that he was my brother. I absolutely felt it. We picked all his bones up, we put it in a box that my mother gave us his clothes, his best clothes that he used to wear before he went to the army. We covered him, we put his clothes in, we locked it, we took the keys, and then the next day they brought him to us.
To date, the remains of 140 individuals have been returned to their families. For Marula and for all of the other mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, the grieving can finally begin.
We prayed for many years that God send us some message, whether good or bad, so that we could start accepting one way or another.
So my brother was returned to us after 33 years. They denied our human rights and the dignity to bury him and to have his gravestone. And actually my mother could have started praying for him and feeling him, and you know, she could have rested many years ago.
Meanwhile, the family of Turkish Cypriot Mustafa Akay believed he had been killed where he disappeared on the Turkish side, but the whereabouts of his body remained unknown.
Sometimes I would think to myself that I could be stepping on his remains. I would wonder if he was under the ground I was walking on.
Then, 45 years after Mesmut's father disappeared, in a Greek Cypriot village on the other side, a man came forward and spoke out and told what he had discovered years ago.
One day, when my wife went to collect olives, she saw a spot where earth had been dug up. And that's why we became suspicious that there was something there.
Christodoulos Konstantinidis was a shepherd at the time. He was unable to speak out for years because the suspected killers were still alive. But recently he told the Missing Persons Committee what he suspected, and excavations began. The discovery would finally bring peace to Mesmut and his family. Just 1 week before we filmed in Cyprus, they were told that Mustafa's remains had been found and identified. He had been shot the day he disappeared in 1964 in the Greek Cypriot village of Seri.
They forced him to dig a 40-centimeter hole, then shot him in the head and threw some earth from the road construction over him. That's what we know.
Mesmut felt a need to see the place where his father spent his last moments. He went with interpreters to the village recently identified as the site of his father's death to try to find the shepherd who could show him the actual spot. Asking around in the local bar, suddenly Christodoulos identified himself. He agreed to take Mesmet to the place where his father had been killed and told him that he could not rest, knowing that the body could remain missing forever if he didn't talk.
People who have lost loved ones should be given the peace of mind of knowing that the remains have been found.
Even though it's taken a long time, I would still like to thank him for his part in the discovery. In the past, both Turkish and Greek Cypriots suffered a lot. To be from different religions and races, to speak a different language, was that a reason to be killed?
I'm very happy that I was able to help. It would be great if all Greek and Turkish Cypriots behaved the same way as we are doing now.
The families of Mustafa and Kyriakos are now able to give their loved ones proper burials.
At least, we now know where he is and what happened. Before, we always had question marks.
But many families are still waiting. More than 1,800 people are still unaccounted for. Cypriots say solving the mystery of those who disappeared is a vital step if the Greek and Turkish communities are to reconcile. Only when the bodies are laid to rest can the forgiveness truly begin.
If people mean well and can transcend their language, ethnic and religious differences and see each other as human beings, why shouldn't there be reconciliation?